On behalf of the Hochstein School, welcome to our performance hall. Serving our community for more than 100 years, Hochstein celebrates of the arts. We ask that you take notice of the emergency exits located at all corners of the hall on both levels. Restrooms are to the back of the hall downstairs. Additional accessible bathrooms are located on the main level in the school building. Please take a moment to silence your electronic devices. For the courtesy of everyone in attendance and on stage, we ask that you remain seated and only enter and exit during applause or a break in the program. Thank you and enjoy the performance.
Welcome to the Hochstein Performance Hall and Rock the Mic's 2021 production of Listen to Your Mother Rochester. Our MC tonight is Pam Sherman. Pam Sherman is a leadership consultant, writer, actor, and recovering lawyer. Today, Sherman speaks, conducts programs, and coaches leaders all over the world about how to present themselves and their mission with passion. She works with Fortune 500 companies, advertising agencies, nonprofits, and as highly rated global resource for leadership groups, including the Entrepreneurs Organization and the Young Presidents Organization. Her column, The Suburban Outlaw, was published on the USA Today Network and in the Democrat and Chronicle for 15 years. In addition, she toured the United States as Irma Bombeck, the original funny mom in print. Please welcome to the stage, Pam Sherman.
Wow. I thought that was going to go on forever. Thank you so much, Erin. I would like to officially welcome you all to Listen to Your Mother 2021. Yes, yes, yes! In person. We don't have a show if we don't have a cast. So please help me welcome the 12 glorious storytellers who will share their stories tonight. Wow. They are glorious, and that was quite an entrance. And thank you for that incredible applause. I'll never forget the first time I went to Listen to Your Mother, and I sat enthralled in the audience. And frankly, I was really jealous that I wasn't up on stage, and more jealous that I hadn't written the incredible stories that I heard that night. I was so honored when I was asked to be the MC, especially for this really auspicious night, having you all here in the audience. And so, in honor of my mother tonight, I'm actually wearing, this was my mother's jacket and her fabulous rings, because everything was big. And my very last column paid tribute to my mom, who we lost in December of 2020. And it was about the greatest generation of women who grew up in the Depression and who weathered World War II and the Korean War, and all of their stories that came together to create the women who are here today. So I am incredibly honored that the producers of Listen to Your Mother asked me to come. I'm also a mother, and I'm going through a lot of drama, but we'll talk about that another time. So whether you're watching at home or live in the theater tonight, we're really excited to see this cast tell these very personal stories, because they've been waiting to tell them in person on stage for over a year. And that, right? That makes tonight's show even more special. I don't know about you, but over the last year, I've learned the value of sharing stories, witnessing life, and appreciating the importance of seeing tears, laughter, angst, and other emotions on a human face. even masked ones, whether it be on Zoom, on your television set, or here you are, live tonight. It's all about building and nurturing connections, and that's what's necessary for the human experience. When an audience comes together, either virtually or actually, we get one heartbeat. That's actually true. So there is a one heartbeat happening amongst the producers of this show. I've seen their heart in how they've treated the performers and all of the effort that they've put into putting this night on for you and also for everyone at home. So I'd like to introduce the team that's made Listen to Your Mother Rochester 2021 come to life. So help me welcome Monica Gabel, executive producer, Erin Julian, executive director, producers Christine Green, Jane Knickerbocker, Terri Pease, and Taylor Terrance.
Thank you, Pam. It is a thrill to have you as our MC this evening. I'm Erin Julian, and I've had the honor of serving as executive director to Listen to Your Mother this year. First, I need to acknowledge Monica. Monica, it is an honor to work with you and Rock the Mic Productions. We are so thankful for all you have done to keep Listen to Your Mother in Rochester. While you are not on stage with us tonight, you are with us always. I was in the 2018 cast, and I served as a producer in 2019. When I raised my hand to take the lead, I knew there was going to be challenges and opportunities. I did not count on a pandemic. It became a heroic task that everyone to make this night possible. We became the superheroes of live performance, the masked crusaders of the arts. It is our production team, our cast, and our crew. Thank you for rising to the challenge and coming along for the ride. We owe a debt of gratitude to the producers and cast members that came before us. Your success made tonight possible. We need to thank Raquel Walker and Maxfield Orr, both who worked as producers in 2020. While we miss having them on the team, they are now tackling new opportunities, and we love seeing them soar. We need to thank Megan Sperber for stepping in and making us look real good in print. You may also see that unfortunately tonight we are missing a cast member. For some of you, this is deja vu. Melanie Funchess was in our 2019 cast and was called to a family emergency just hours before show. We invited her back once again, and unfortunately she is not able to join us. Her story is clearly destined for something more. Tonight we are holding her in our hearts and we miss her deeply. I also need to give a special shout out to Jane Knickerbocker. She joined our production team, but was not able to be on stage with us tonight. Sometimes moms just got a mom, even the bad ones. Lastly, I need to thank my partner, Mike. He's the bookends that keep me upright, my most favorite hug, and my biggest fan. Christine.
Thank you. We want to thank the audience. Thank you for bringing your energy into this space tonight, both here at Hochstein and those of you at home. The collective energy is beautiful. Can you feel it? You can, right? It's creating that quiet hum. There's anticipation, support, love. You truly are a huge part of it, and the reason Listen to Your Mother Rochester continues to grow and create such positive ripples in our families, with our friends, and in our community. It has been amazing to bring to life a show that touches so many hearts and has been so embraced by so many. It truly takes a village. So thank you for showing up as we honor motherhood.
We would like to take a moment to thank our sponsors who helped make the show possible. Thank you to Roxbox Recording and Production, NSP Studio, Selena's Mexican Restaurant, Knox Cocktail Lounge, and Pam Sherman. Thank you, Stacy Rowe, On Hand Lotion, and Wegmans. We share our gratitude for Imprintable Solutions, Inc., Sherman Furniture Rentals, Divine Yoni. Thank you, Writers and Books, Rochester Spoken Word, Lozier Environmental Consulting, Inc., Panache Vintage and Fine Art Consignment, Karen Craft Photography and Design, Terri Pease, Certified Financial Coach. Hey, that's me. Pittsford Pediatric Dentistry, and Brockport Research Institute. And a special thank you to our ASL interpreters, Kayla Brown and Rebecca Folkerts.
The rest of my script is not here. Thank you. Our production team also wants to express gratitude for our families. In 2019, I took the stage to tell the story of my mom blasting my dad in the head with a kayak. And after these past 18 months, I think we all know what it feels like to be repeatedly struck in the temple by the kayak of life. Our families have been there to witness every unexpected blow to the head, and I just think that's really beautiful. Turning our attention toward another beautiful thing, our mission to link creative expression with charitable giving to local nonprofits that serve women and children. Once again, all proceeds from tonight's event will benefit a crucial organization, the Society for the Protection and Care of Children, SPCC. Over 5 seasons of Rochester's Listen to Your Mother, we've raised more than $40,000 for SPCC. Our city struggles with some of the worst child poverty rates in the nation, so events like this give us hope. Purchasing a ticket for tonight's show directly impacts the lives of our most vulnerable citizens. To share how the Society for the Protection and Care of Children is a positive force in our community is Sarah Fitzgibbons. Sarah serves as the clinical director at SPCC, and she was also on the original production team that brought Listen to Your Mother to Rochester. Thank you, Sarah.
Okay, now I find my page. Since 2015, Listen to Your Mother has ensured that the 7,000 children and families SPCC serves each year, impacted by trauma, adversity, loss, hunger, racism, and poverty, can get what they need. Your support has tremendous, immediate, and long-lasting impact. The stories told from this stage each year stay with our agency and connect with the work that we do every day. In our very first show, our late, wonderful friend, Bernadette Lynch, shared her story of finding light in the darkness. As our years went on, Tokia Graham reminded us that love can be a life preserver, that nourishment flows 2 ways. Nicole Bailey passed on her mother's wisdom, that life doesn't always go as planned, but it is always amazing. And if you remember, in 2019, Erica Bryant pointed out that while we do want our stories to end with profound, beautiful morals, sometimes a story is simply a cautionary tale reminding us to always fasten both tabs of the diaper. These and all Listen to Your Mother's stories are woven into the fabric of SPCC. You have offered us light, community, and connection, the opportunity for a time and a space to listen to each other, to feel heard,
to feel less alone, to revel in what unites us, to cherish how our paths are different, and to celebrate that vulnerability is the only way to grow, heal, and find each other. SPCC thanks each and every one of you for your connection and support. Thank you.
Oh, I love that. Thank you, Sarah. So SPCC does incredible work, the work of moms. So if you're able, please consider donating directly to them so our impact can be even greater. You can visit spcc-roch.org to donate. And now, it's time for the show and our storytellers. Our first story comes to us from Walt Way, who weaves a beautiful tale about a mother's devotion. It's part checklist, part poetry, and all love. Here is 14 and a half things my mother taught me.
Jill Churchill once said, "There's no way to be a perfect mother and a million ways to be a good one." I've always thought mothers were the closest thing to God as they bring life into this universe. I was told that the hardest part is you have to keep this life that you gave life alive. Amongst flames that can melt flesh from bone to water that can extinguish those same flames that you worry about me drowning in. I'm sorry for every time I scared you. I promise all your tears were not wasted. They landed in soil and grew into a man you could be proud of. All that pain did not go in vain, so right now, only if you allow, I'll explain 14 and a half things you taught me. 1, listen to your mother. I had my first surgery on my ears at an age I can't remember. Lack of hearing had me miss out on your laughter as well as your screams. My siblings may call this a blessing and a curse. 2, listen to your mother. I thought my ears were fixed, I guess they weren't. Surgery number 2, I couldn't hear a pin drop in a quiet room, but you made sure you were in my ears, as well as expand your vocal cords well outside the range of normal, just so you can tell me everything would be all right. 3, 4, 5, and 6, listen to your mother. They finally got my ears fixed. I can hear you. I can hear every whisper. I can hear every yell. It's like I was your audience and you were a poet. I can hear everything you say, like when you tell me, clean this room, come and eat, pause that game, turn that TV down, and clean this room. I can hear everything you say, like when you tell me you love me to the moon. I can finally respond in a timely manner. I always told you I loved you to God. You always replied with, "Ooh, you got me." 7, you taught me how to smile. As you told me a million times, I look just like my daddy, but my smile will forever resemble yours. With my ears working, I listed as doctors rattled off health problems. They put me on medications that you never heard of. So you kept this list longer than Santa's. You checked off which meds were naughty, which were nice, but we didn't know how they affected me until they did. I loved to smile like you until I couldn't. 7th surgery was on my mouth. My face was swollen. I didn't want to talk, let alone smiles, but you found a way to make me laugh. 8, you taught me how to believe. You told me I could be anything, a doctor, a dancer, a poet, even president. You saw what I couldn't. My 8th surgery was on my eye. I have astigmatism. We was told it was common. I wore glasses that you picked out almost every year since kindergarten. I didn't want to wear them, not because they were ugly, but because you picked them out and not me. Looking back at your selection, I guess I look cute or whatever. I couldn't see me with your eyes, and I couldn't see you with mine. You held my hand as you guided me through a childhood you never imagined. Late night check-ins, the constant worries, the precision needed to take care of an individual with my status. That status is your child. I'm kind of sad because I'm just now seeing that. 9, you taught me compassion. You told me my voice could change the world. My 9th surgery was a pH probe. They had this thing going from my stomach to a device in the palm of my hand. You monitored every cough, every sneeze, every second of sleep. I don't even know if you slept. You look far beyond your own woes and pains to cater to mine. 10, you taught me to trust my gut. You knew something was wrong. It was like you could feel my pain. It's like my food hated me. It felt like I was taking bites of wrath, and what came back up was vengeance in the form of something called acid reflux. It left a hole in my esophagus. My 10th surgery involved my stomach. Long story short, I was cut 5 times, my esophagus tied to the bottom of my stomach. Believe it or not, that was the easy part. You stayed with me every day inside that hospital. You slept on uncomfortable chairs for almost a week straight just to stay by my side. You showed me the definition of resiliency well before I knew of the word. I just called it love. 11, you taught me how to appreciate life. Surgery number 11 was another pH probe. We went in with confidence. I did this before, I can do it again. Everything was going fine. Crazy thing is, I had a dream under anesthesia for the first time. I woke up in that recovery room that looked oh so familiar. I looked over to you. You're sitting there in a chair, clenching your purse and coat tightly, as if there was a thief in the area. You stand up. You ask me how I feel. I tell you I'm okay. You tell me they lost me. I think to myself, I could see that happen. This is a big hospital. No, they lost me on that table. That was the first time I saw fear in your eyes. And at that moment, I realized you worry about losing me just as much as I worry about losing you. 11 and a half. You taught me how to embrace uncertainty. You were never a big football fan. But on this day, when that doctor came from that operating room, his voice resembled a coach. He just called the play, 17 power. With a power, you're going straight downhill. The defense knows where you are, and you know where they're going to be lined up at. They just have to stop you. No play was called. The doctor told you something went wrong. I woke up in the middle of the surgery. He told you I was in recovery. What he didn't say, I was doing perfectly fine. I usually am after a probe. They told me the door slammed open. Defense tried to stop you, but you were running straight downhill. They knew where you were going, and you knew where I was at. Needless to say, they couldn't stop you. 12 and a half. You taught me it's okay not to be okay. Another probe. Here we go again. I'm tired of these hospital visits. You can smell the depression creep through my pores as if I'm getting drunk on my own sadness. You always reminded me of how strong I am. The fact that no matter how broken I became, you always found ways to put me back together. 13 and a half. You taught me how to be gentle. This one was different. It was called a Bravo probe. Doctor showed me the size, and I swear it resembled a mustard seed. So I had faith this would be the easy one. As I sat up in that dim recovery room, it felt like the Hawk and Thor was playing tug of war with my intestines. I have never been in this much pain. I could have stayed in that hospital, but like every other time before you chose to take me home, you placed pillows on the couch in a way I would be comfortable. You shrunk portions of food down because I couldn't eat much. You watched how you touched me because you could see the grief in my eyes. But still through all of that, you found ways of letting me know that you were still there. 14 and a half. You taught me motherhood never ends. I was 18 years old. I'm taking college classes. I drove to Florida with my dad. I touched more states than a politician. The last surgery, I just had to get a tooth pulled, nothing serious. But you know I wanted you there with me. And you were. I learned it's hard to tell one story when you have a book of memories. Love a mother can give is good for the soul, so it sticks to your ribs like when the child hugs you. Love is unconditional. Jill Churchill once said, there's no way to be a perfect mother and a million ways to be a good one. You just did it in under 15.
They gave us all tissues back there, and now I know why. Thank you, Walt. Having spent nights with children in hospitals and was at their bedsides even recently, I love that last quote. And you reminded us that being perfect doesn't need to be the goal. When life throws you into one imperfect situation after another, the most honorable thing you can do is to stand up straight and aim to be good, which you are very, very good. Yes. So just keep showing up. That's a lesson we've all learned over the last 18 months as chaos ensued. Kelly Metras applies this idea to motherhood as she recalls her mom's commitment to the long game with her story, I See.
I have never been good at listening to my mother. As an adult, I found out that my grandmother gave her a note saying, the child that causes you the most trouble will make you the most proud. She kept that note, and she listened to her mother. I didn't know what that meant for a long time. My mother only ever wanted to be mom. There were no grad school dreams, career focuses. What should I be ideal? She wanted to be mom. She wanted to dote over her children and grandchildren, and she worked around our schedules and lives since day one. I never thought much about being a mother. I knew I would have kids. I wanted to adopt or foster, but I constantly struggled with what I wanted to be. People started asking when I was a toddler. The choices were limitless for girls my age, which was a fairly new concept. I was only the third cousin to get a college degree, and I'm the only person in my family that owns a business. My mother was and is great at listening when I struggled, but because I couldn't ask, I couldn't listen. Growing up, there were times I swore she loved my brother more. He was the perfect child. To this day, everyone adores him. A pregnancy and a birth to gush about a sleeping newborn. Such a sweet little boy. It's nauseating to hear about him as a child. She dreamed of one day having a daughter, a sweet, cuddly girl. She had no idea I was coming. Almost 4 a.m. on a January day in Rochester, my petite mother naturally birthed a beast of a child at 9 pounds, 5 ounces. They joke she had no neck during her pregnancy and that she looked like a linebacker. In the pictures, I always thought she looked beautiful. My poor mother. I didn't have a dainty bone in my body. I pushed her in ways she never expected from the womb. Words used to describe me as a child are tomboy, stubborn, didn't listen. I wanted to play with worms, be in the dirt, run free, get filthy. My brother was easy to love. I made her work for it. I made her prove it, and I never listened. When I struggled, which was often, she was there to pull me up by the bootstraps in her no bullshit, we're gonna figure this out kind of way. She always listened. School suspension, she might have pulled me out of school by my ponytail in front of what seemed like everyone. Speeding tickets, questionable friends and activities. That woman can find her children anywhere. Before cell phones and GPS, she gave Sherlock Holmes something to think about. An eating disorder that lasted longer than she ever knew. She even became a volunteer at the clinic that helped me. Failing out of college, my 20s, that woman should have canceled cable TV. Lifetime movies and me moving out didn't go well. Bartending, every parent's dream for their daughter, burying myself in student loans to get a master's degree, taking a teaching job with behaviorally challenged youth, getting pregnant at 30 by my much younger and ex-boyfriend. She listened, and I think she knew before I did. Having barbecue at my wedding. That fight lasted forever, and to this day, she still talks about how good the food was. 2 fixer-upper houses, we can do this. Buying a restaurant. When it flooded, she took over my household for 21 straight days. Well, we tore it down and rebuilt it. Dinner, running the kids around, laundry, all of it, no questions asked. Opening another restaurant, opening a nonprofit restaurant with high school students. Closing it. The phone calls, the venting, the crying, she listened. 3 C-sections, a near-death experience, becoming a foster mom, making her become a foster oma. I never even thought to ask her, but she always listened. My mother showed up to it all, 100% in, whether she really felt that way or not. Only my Aunt Kim knows the answer. Except for that barbecue. We all know how she felt about that one. She never questioned whether it was more important to be my friend or my mother. In fact, I have friends from high school that are still scared of her and others that call her on Mother's Day and her birthday. They were better than me at listening to my mother. When I had a bad breakup, she'd crawl into bed with me. When I'd hang up on her, she'd show up at my door. I don't remember what she said most of the time, but I remember she showed up. And not just for me, for anyone that needed a mother. They may not all call, but they all saw her and what she was willing to do. It's said that children just need one supportive adult in their lives to make a difference. Just one. I saw that difference firsthand. And people are surprised I became a foster parent. Without her there for me, I would have never had the strength to follow my gut and get through much of my life. Led me all to my today and to my husband, whom I will gush incessantly over until he pisses me off. Then I call my mother. She listens. When I got pregnant, she was ready to support my decision regardless of what it was. I became a mother for the first time, single, at a high-stress job in a brand new fixer-upper house with my much younger ex-boyfriend. She was there every day, always listening. When I became a mother for the second time, I had recently bought a very expensive restaurant with my now much younger husband. And my baby went into the special care nursery. She was there every day, and she parented my 2-year-old. When I became a mother for the third time, I had a very fragile delivery. I was in the OR much longer than normal. I had to be put under. I had an out-of-body experience that still haunts me today. I lost so much blood that my recovery, both physical and emotional, lasted over 2 years. She was there for all of it, listening. When I became a mother for the 4th time, I didn't know until 2 hours prior. I called my husband. I called the county. I called my mother. She was there when the baby arrived. She helped us settle in, and she treated her like her own from day one. When I struggled with co-parenting with strangers and all the ways the system failed my 4th daughter, she listens. All 4 were not what I expected. All 4 were nothing like what my mother knew. I couldn't listen because I couldn't ask. Raising my 4 girls is not like what I expected, and nothing like what my mother knew. I can't listen because I can't ask, but I see. I see my mother when she helps me figure out my children and how to meet their needs. Did you know that a child could be born a vegetarian and the next one can only want to eat meat? Our babies are only babies for a tiny bit of time, and then they're little humans that we're trying not to screw up. I see my mother when she tells me I'm doing my best, that they will be okay, and that they are surrounded by love and support, that it's okay to mess up, fix it, and keep going. I see my mother attending events even when she's in pain. I see her helping any of her grandbabies and children in any way that she can. Nothing can keep that woman from the cheering squad. In my world, my mother helps raise my kids. She helps strengthen my marriage, helps me through struggles with work, helps to maintain my mental health. She helps me be the best human I can be. She's a boss. My mother taught me everything I needed to know about showing up and how to get shit done. It doesn't matter who you are or what you need, she'll be there. I need to listen to my mother, my grandmother, my aunts, stories about my great-grandmothers and my great-aunts. They make me the woman I show up as today. I am a daughter, a sister, an aunt, a mother, a wife, a friend, a boss. I get shit done because my mother taught me how. It turns out I may have been listening. Recently, my mother gave me that card. I listened to her. I know what it's like to have a child that makes you prove it, makes you work for it. I know what it's like to love with a mother's intensity, and I know what it's like to not be listened to by my children. I just hope they see.
Thank you, Kelly. Bravery and personal sacrifice is easy to do when it comes to the things we know we want. But what about the surprises in life? Rylie Day tackles this question with her breathtaking entry into motherhood, The Garden of Becoming.
From the ages of 15 to 23, I only ate cheese if the alternative was a feeding tube. At 29, it is my inability to finish a bowl of macaroni and cheese that alerts me to the fact that I am pregnant. A drugstore test will confirm this, and as I sit on the edge of the bathtub waiting, I think of Christ's prayer in the Garden of Gethsemane. Lord, be it thy will, let this cup pass over me. Let this cup pass over me. In the 90 seconds it takes for the results, I reflect on doctors' visits, stern conversations that warn my self-starvation will leave me irrevocably infertile. A phone call from 2011. I'm sorry, but it's highly unlikely you'll have children. I pick up the wand from the porcelain, turn it over in my hand. Let this cup pass over me. My heart drums in my ears as I see the tiny pink plus sign. This is my cross to bear. That night, I drink red wine and chain smoke cigarettes on the porch until I vomit crimson into a waste paper basket. Staring at the crumbs and gum wrappers stuck to the bottom, I whisper a hollow confession that echoes back in my ears. I do not want this baby. I hope for stomach cramps and spots of blood. I go to bed thinking of all the women with empty wombs who are praying for missed periods. I reflect on the lost pregnancies of those close to me. Shame wells up inside me high enough that I can feel it in the back of my throat. That night, I dream I give birth to a deformed, multi-limbed child that has fed off the hate of its host. A creature too ugly for even a mother to love. The gel the ultrasound technician spreads on my abdomen is surprisingly warm. It is a small comfort. She presses the wand down firmly on the soft flesh between my hip bones, shifts it with a purpose. I remember a night, still living at home, of anxiety-induced insomnia. National Geographic on my parents' living room television. There are grasslands in Africa and Australia that burn themselves to the root before the rainy season. Vast expanses of flame and charred soil. It is the only way they can grow new life. Towards the bottom of the screen before us, a static white mass interrupts the dark cavern that is my uterus. It curves up slightly at Wilby head and Wilby toe. Something budding in the dead earth that is my body. We are midpoint in my pregnancy when a midwife tells us that for the past 20 weeks, I have only lost weight. She says it is not the direction I need to be going. I think of all the times I have heard those exact words from nutritionists and psychologists and eating disorder specialists. And just like with those past audiences, I convincingly feign concern and surprise. What I feel is pride. It is a feeling that crumbles later that evening as I think of all the skipped breakfasts and hours of fasting over the past 4.5 months. I remember all the times morning sickness was an excuse, and all the times that it wasn't. In the past, anxiety had always worked in tandem with my disordered eating. Now it rides free, birthing a new fear that I am starving my child. What have I done? I begin to eat with a sense of urgency unknown to me before that moment. Shredded cheese from the bag while meat is cooking, grapes and crackers while I steam rice and vegetables, large spoonfuls of ice cream. I consume every food group. This is my first act of love. Against my better judgment, we choose to reveal the results of our anatomy scan at my childhood home. My nephew breaks a piñata open with a bat. Pink confetti falls around me like the ash of some fire I did not intend to set, and my fear compounds on itself as I am confronted with how ill-fitted I am to be mother to a daughter. I am, after all, a daughter myself. A daughter with a mother who wept over me in hospital beds, who wept about me on the couches of therapists, who wept with me in waiting rooms and lobbies and parking garages. In what ways will I agonize over this child? This is my penance. Later that evening, I strip naked in front of the bathroom mirror. I stare at myself, squeezing handfuls of the flesh on my thighs and hips. There is guilt over what I hold there, but more guilt over the fact that even now, 15 years from where it all began, I am locked hidden in the bathroom looking for all the ways I hate myself. How will I show her to love herself completely when I only ever consider myself as a sum of my parts? How will I teach her to trust her own judgment when the duality of my mind leaves me paralyzed? How will I encourage her to forgive her own mistakes when I wear my past like an anchor around my neck? These are the questions for which I have no answers. We give her a name, and it is our first gift to her, Ezra. It means helper, healer. I pray she wears it like a banner over her life, that any help she gives is never at her own expense, that when she has to heal, it is never from wounds I will inflict. My hopes for her grow, and logically, love follows. But just like anything else I have ever cared for or about, there is a direct correlation between the intensity of my love for her and the severity of my irrational fear that something terrible will happen to her. I begin Googling miscarriages at 22 weeks gestation, 23, 25, 28, 34. Each morning over coffee and peanut butter toast, I discover new ways she can die. And instead of my findings remaining mere cautionary tales, sad stories of the lost babies of strangers, they take root in my mind as inevitabilities. I am looking at my future. Fear becomes a character in my life, as real as the daughter I have become convinced I will never meet. It follows behind me on midday walks, breath like sulfur on the back of my neck. It snakes its fingers around my throat in fitful sleep. It houses itself inside me until it is the eyes through which I see. ravens circling the hospital, waiting to claim what is theirs, a tiny pine coffin, a headstone in the autumn rain, and me, a childless mother. In the heat of summer, I eat fruit until the juices run down my chin, consume half a brick of Gouda cheese in one sitting, balance a carton of my ice cream on my belly without shame. I need to give her a fighting chance. If nothing else, my child has inherited my tendency to be late. 11 days after my due date has come and gone, the midwife explains the process of induction, and while I nod intently from the hospital bed, my internal dialogue is, I am not ready. Have I done enough? Have I done good enough? My contractions begin during Final Jeopardy and continue with increasing intensity throughout the night. I endure them silently. Too concerned I am with waking her father, never wanting to take up too much room, afraid of inhabiting more emotional real estate than is my fair share. I do not allow my gaze to fall from the monitor for more than a minute or two. With each small spike or dip of her heart rate, I think, this is when you lose her. As dawn cracks through the small window of our room, I can no longer speak. I can barely breathe. And it is then that I realize that for the past 41 weeks and 5 days, nourishing Ezra was not only keeping her safe in my womb, but a means of preparing her for the transition through the threshold of my body and into a world that will change simply by her being in it. Have I done enough? Have I done good enough? Pain becomes my companion, my guide. It braids my weaknesses into the rope I grasp through the stormy waters of the next several hours. Each wave of it propels her closer to me. This pain has a purpose. She will be here in minutes, and it won't be until much later that I realize the pain long ago exorcised the fear that had taken up residency within me, cast it out, and planted capability in its place. I am capable. My body is now, finally, a vessel I can trust. And as it brings her forth into awaiting hands, there is no room for thoughts of the uneaten or the undone. My hot tears are watering this garden of becoming, and fear holds no root in its soil. Her head finds its home in the crook of my neck, fingers kneading into my chest. A tiny cry, her first greeting, and it satiates any hunger, quells all unrest. She is warm. She is wanted. She is mine.
When life's challenges sneak in, sometimes you're the new mom, like Rylie, but other times you're the kid. Our next story explores what it's like to be the child in the midst of struggle and how ultimately mom's role is important on both sides of the equation. Here's Deanna Spiotta and with I Want My Mom.
I opened my groggy eyes to see what I always see, a room full of blurry shapes and colors. I remembered that I was in the hospital, but where were my glasses? I must have lost track of them after the extremely painful episode I had just experienced. I was in the hospital enduring a severe flare of ulcerative colitis, an autoimmune disease and chronic illness that has no cure. It means that throughout my life, I will be periodically dealing with abdominal pain that feels like the sound a steak makes when it hits a hot pan. That's the only way I can think how to describe it. These periods of symptoms are called flares. As my eyes adjusted, I made sense of the blurry shapes and realized that my 61-year-old mother was standing at the end of my hospital bed watching me, her 31-year-old daughter, sleep. It hit me in that moment how traumatic that episode must have been, not only for me, but for her. Just about 30 minutes before, she had watched me struggle with abdominal pain so severe that my nurse and patient care tech had to lift me off the bathroom floor and into my hospital bed. It was the most horrible thing I've ever experienced. But in that moment, I wonder what it must be like to watch your child endure such intense pain and not be able to take it away from her. And I wondered if that pain is almost worse. "You caught me," said my mother, referring to the fact that she had been watching me sleep. It made me think of the few times that I vaguely remember catching her watch me sleep as a child. It also made me wonder how many times I hadn't caught her. Something about my mother watching me sleep brought me an innate and familiar comfort. It reminded me how she used to read the last few pages of Goodnight Moon to me as a child. I can always hear her voice read it as if she's right next to me. Goodnight stars and goodnight air, goodnight noises everywhere. Moments throughout that flare gave me new perspective on what age I will stop needing and depending on my mother. When I pictured my adult self as a child, I pictured calling my mom every week, sharing family dinners, being close friends, and talking to her about my husband and my kids, which it turns out I don't have yet. But I never pictured her literally holding my hand as I writhed in pain on my bathroom floor. I never pictured her being by my side as my primary caregiver while I was dealing with a chronic illness. This experience made me realize that the bond between mother and baby persists throughout adult life, and that mothering doesn't end at the age of 18, 25, 30, or even beyond. Nights in the hospital were not very restful. Aside from my pain keeping me up and my vitals being checked every couple hours, for some reason I needed blood work done at 1 a.m. every morning. Each morning this was an upsetting process. I already get really anxious when getting blood work done, but I also have small veins that are hard to find. And when they are found, I'm told that they roll. So it's difficult for a phlebotomist to stick me with a needle once and be done. One morning, I was stuck 6 times, and they still didn't successfully draw my blood. I was trying to hold back my tears, not very successfully, when they said they'd come back and try again later. Once they left and I was alone, I let it all out, and as I sobbed, I said out loud to my dark, empty room, "I want my mom." A part of me didn't want to tell her that the next morning because I knew it was painful for her to not be able to sleep over in the hospital with me. Before I had been admitted to the hospital that December of 2018, my mom knew that this flare was the worst yet. One night, she came to sleep over at my house. She prepared what little food I could tolerate and brought me my medicine when I couldn't get out of bed to take it. That night, I crawled back into my bed from the bathroom after another horrible bout of pain and asked my mom to come lay next to me and hold my hand. I asked her if we could sing "Be Not Afraid," a hymn that was sung in church throughout my childhood. So my 61-year-old mother and my 31-year-old self, mother and baby, lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, and we sang, "Be not afraid, I go before you always, come follow me, and I will give you rest." At times we couldn't remember all the words to every verse, even though Google helped, but it didn't even matter. I just needed my mom by my side, in it, with me. Good night stars and good night air, good night noises everywhere.
What a beautiful voice, what a beautiful story. I couldn't find the tissues, so I'm a bit of a wreck right now. We certainly don't want to leave dad out of the equation. Sometimes we just want our fathers, right? Our next story offers a new perspective on the early days of parenting. Robert Shelton's misadventures in rookie parenting are told here in his charming tale. It didn't fall. Great. Mr. Mom.
The birthdays in my wife's family come all at once. First her father, then her sister, and finally my wife, Tara, are celebrated all in a row on the 16th, 17th, and 18th days of May. For years, I know this only as an odd coincidence, a simple piece of family lore. And then comes April, 1996. Tara is 7.5 months pregnant with our first child when her water breaks 6 weeks early on my birthday. It's scary, but it still feels like we're ready. We've been preparing. We have months of Lamaze training behind us. We can control our breathing fully and at will. Our copy of What to Expect When You're Expecting is so thoroughly dog-eared and back-folded, it looks like it's been run over by a car. And we've come up with our own childcare plan. We will each take turns. The fact that we both work at the same company makes this easier. One of us will work in the office while the other works at home, taking care of the baby. Then, after some weeks or months, we'll switch. Mom will take the first at-home stint. Mr. Mom will take the second. After a day spent at the hospital under observation, events begin in earnest. Contractions start. The baby's coming. Nurses call the doctor in and rush Tara to delivery. A moment later, I'm dressed in hospital scrubs and standing at her bedside trying to recall my Lamaze training while staying out of everybody's way. Tara pretends to follow my coaching and breathes through the contractions just as we had practiced. She really has it down. Clearly she could do this on her own. I wonder, could that Lamaze class have overstated my importance? 2 hours later, on the day after my birthday, Tara delivers Ben into this world. He'll need some extra care for being early, but he's healthy. It's a joyous moment. Mother, doctors, nurses, all of us excited by the successful arrival. Then the doctor turns and looks at me. You, he says, on the floor, now, head between your knees. From his tone and the dizzy feeling in my head, I deduce that my face has turned the same grim shade of green as my scrubs. I take a careful seat on the floor and lean my back against the wall's cold tile. A nurse carrying a juice box walks right on past the exhausted mother, cradling her newborn, and reaches down beside the wall to offer refreshment to the one who clearly needs it most. The bewildered and overwhelmed new dad. I blink, and it's June of 1997. It is way too hot for this early in the summer. Tara is 8.5 months pregnant with our second boy. We're taking turns at childcare as we'd planned. Tara has rotated back into the office and will continue working there right up until her due date. I've had a few months to settle into my shift at home as Mr. Mom. It's about midday, and I'm standing in line at Rochester Community Savings Bank, holding my 14-month-old son, Ben, upright in the crook of my left elbow. Impatience keeps my focus on the task at hand. I need to knock this one out fast so I can get back home well before nap time. If I get caught driving home too close to nap time, I risk Ben falling asleep in the car. If that happens, I will park at home and open the door to lift him from his car seat, and he will wake up, refreshed and ready for an afternoon of mischief. He won't go back to sleep, and the entire day will turn unmanageable. Today, that doesn't happen, though. The line moves quickly, and we're back at home with time to spare. After some lunch and a diaper change, he falls asleep on schedule. And now comes the frantic part. I clip the baby monitor to my belt and watch the clock as I run around for hours, putting the house in order. My hands and feet are more in charge than I am. I get most of it pretty close to done. Then I blink, and he's awake and happy, playing in his crib. We spend the afternoon's remainder reading tales of Babar and his crown. There's something fascinating about elephants that walk upright, wearing suits. I'm thinking that one over when the front door opens, and just like that, it's Mr. Mom's favorite time of day, the part where actual mom comes home from work. For her, the joy of reuniting with her child. For me, the joy of speaking with a grown-up in complete and complex sentences. We settle into the traditional exchange of stories on the subject of how was your day. She's wearing a big, bright smile as she reaches down to pick Ben up. You seem happy, I say. Were you listening to the voicemail again? Yes, she says. I made Marcy and Patty and Denise all come stand at my desk and listen to it on speaker. The voicemail. It's the talk of the office, both as a form of entertainment and as the cause of a significant drop in employee productivity. Here's how it happened. A few weeks earlier, I'd been partway through a routine diaper change. After 100 or so of these, you tend to sail right through them. We unpaid professionals like to break them into phases. This one began, as always, with the deposition phase, wherein I would lay Ben face up onto a flat surface. From deposition, I proceeded directly to the discovery phase and began to open his diaper. It was during discovery that I recoiled and winced, making a face that made Ben laugh. It was a deep belly laugh, like he couldn't help himself. I set my work aside and made the face again. He laughed, just as before, but harder. He seemed to raise the volume with each repetition, so of course I just kept doing it. This went on so long that I had time to grab the cordless phone off the wall and call Tara's desk at work, leaving her a minutes-long voicemail message of our son laughing himself absolutely silly. Oh my God, that giggling is too much, she says. It completely ruined my afternoon for work. I'm glad, and you're welcome, I say. Did you get out of the house much today? Yep, a couple of times. A morning walk with the umbrella stroller, the dog got some exercise, and we went to the bank. You took the dog to the bank? No, just Ben. Across the room, our son is reading Baybar, sitting bare-chested in the summer heat. Tara's got excitement in her voice. Hey, what did you dress him in? Sorry? When you went out, did you put him in that onesie? Which onesie? You know, the cute one, that yellow one with Winnie the Pooh on it? Oh, right, I answer. No, that one's in the laundry. I hung it outside to dry during his nap. She runs through the alternatives. Well, that shirt your father got him doesn't match his clean pants. Did you take him in his jammies? No. Now she's getting it. And from the dismay I'm reading on her face, I'm beginning to get it too. We are on the same page. She has figured out that I took our son into a public place dressed in whatever he had on the moment I decided to perform this errand, which in this case was a diaper. And I have figured out that that sort of expedient execution, while it may have the virtue of efficiency, it lacks other equally important virtues. There's not much that could save me now. And since she's already had my job, since she's already done the work of primary caregiver herself, there is no earthly need for me to explain to her how difficult it can be. She already knows firsthand. And yet here I go. Well, there's a lot to juggle and it's hot out, and they close at 3, which is right in the middle of his nap time, so I had to get there and back pretty fast because you have to stick to that, the nap time, or you'll never get any work done. When it comes to the laundry, you just have to be ruthless, not give an inch, or it'll take over the whole house. And I already skipped breakfast so I could get this other stuff done, and we're at the end of the month now, so I've only got a couple more chances to get the car inspected, and this is going to get a whole lot tougher, when his little brother comes along. I'd hang my head in shame, but there's no need to. We each know how the other feels because we've each been there, which is perhaps the greatest power of our taking turns at childcare. I look at Ben standing bow-legged in his diaper and remember all the things that changed once crawling ceased to be his only mode of transport. I had just figured out how to manage him when he went and learned a new trick. In 3 more weeks, his brother will arrive. But by then, Tara and I will switch roles again, so I'm not worried. Things will get taken care of and done right for a change. Mr. Mom's shift will be over. I will rotate out. Mom will be in charge.
We used to say, tag, you're it, diaper's yours. Thank you, Robert, for that reminder that when it comes to momming, sometimes the who is just as important as the what. So we look at that again as Jeanette Colby joins us and speaks about her trek up the American ladder of success and her realization that through it all, it's her mother's hands grabbing onto each rung. Here's her story, Hands Like Hers.
I once yelled at her, "I don't want to end up with your hands." She very rarely asked me to do the dishes or the housework, but when she did, I made sure she knew I wasn't happy about it. I knew right after I had said the words, I had stung her. Like most young American teenagers, I was self-absorbed with clothes, boys, and Madonna. My mother at the time, in her late 30s, had rough hands and arms and the scars of a young woman who grew up in rural Mexico and then worked as a live-in maid. I knew the other girls my age were given household chores, getting gold stars under the family chart, or a monthly allowance as a reward for checking off the box of responsibility. But I don't think my mother saw it this way. She grew up in the town of Sabinas, Coahuila, Mexico, where as a child, she would travel with her family to pick cotton under the summer sun. She wore a long sleeve dress and a wide brim hat to protect her skin. She and her sisters worked to earn the money they needed to buy school books and clothes for the year. When I was a child, my mom and dad would take my younger sister and I on summer road trips to Dallas or Houston, Texas, where we would go on the roller coasters and bumper cars at Six Flags and Astroworld. My mother would make us wear the same color shirts and shorts so she could create enduring memories for years to come. I just thought it was so I could complain about it for years to come as we look back at our family photos. She was an orphan by age 12. Her mother died in a fire and her father in a car accident a few years before. She was one of the oldest of 5 sisters, so it fell on her to travel to the United States for work to send money home. Her eldest sister married at 16, staying behind to raise the youngest girls. My mother came to the United States at 14 on a 3-day pass, an 8th grade education, and a dream. When I was 12, the furthest I traveled from my middle-class home in the suburbs of San Antonio was only a few blocks. I would ride up and down the hills of my neighborhood on my yellow Schwinn bike and park near my favorite trees to write poetry. And as most mothers do, she often puts her daughters ahead of her own needs. She made sure we had the prettiest clothes and shoes to wear to church and school. I'd later learn that the best gifts my mother got as a child came in small paper bags where she would find oranges, socks, and candy. As Spanish was my mother's first language, she learned much of her English vocabulary right along with me at every grade in class. We had a favorite book, Mexicali Soup, a story about a mother cooking for her family who were all trying to fit into a new city, only to have each family member ask that an ingredient be taken out of the soup until they sat in front of the bowl with nothing but water. I had often had to write my mother's checks or correct her language when she didn't make sense to the strangers at the grocery store. When I grew up, I wished that I would be more like the other mothers that spoke with power and were always heard by others around them. I didn't know that her sisters had shamed my mother for not teaching me how to communicate with them in Spanish, since English was my first language. As a young Mexican immigrant woman growing up alone in San Antonio, Texas, she endured constant harassment and derogatory slurs. I once told my mother in a clothing store not to speak in Spanish, so we wouldn't attract the attention of the salespeople on the floor. Then I turned 18. I was lured by the call of a drug called Young and in Love, And without any remorse, I dropped out of my first semester of community college and hopped into my boyfriend's car to head north. The entire family tried to talk me out of it, but I wouldn't listen. I don't even remember saying goodbye to my mother. But always, with just a phone call, she was there. I lived in my new city of Rochester, New York, and tried to figure out my place in the world. I didn't experience the xenophobia my mother lived through, but my new city wasn't without its brackish behavior. At the time, the only Mexican restaurant in the area was called Chi-Chi's, a word that I understood to mean in Mexican slang for breast. If I took my time with something, it was okay because people said that Texans did things slow. People didn't understand why I didn't speak with an accent or often asked me if I had grown up on a ranch. And at the same time, my lighter shade of skin color gave me an advantage, yet my maiden name, Bettis, didn't automatically score me a job interview. I walked into a Galveston's Texas bar and grill and got the job on the spot because, well, I was from Texas. I would always call my mother when I needed her. In the days before the mobile phone, she set up a 1-800 number for me just in case. One day I called to tell her that I was pregnant. On the other side of the country, my mother kept going. Already a United States citizen, she was a leader in the church community, and she used her hands to become a sought-after cook and tamale maker. She did so well that she became a test chef for a fast food chain and later opened her own catering business. I'd become a Mexican-American teenage mother in my part of the world, starting my life without a college degree, and many thought a statistic destined to struggle throughout life. But I never saw it this way. I now see that my mother had taught me the value of education and learning. I had been a hostess, a retail cashier, a terrible waitress, a telemarketer, and an advertising assistant. I had earned all of my own scars. Always going and moving forward, I went to college part-time while raising a family, and all the while working my way up the ladder at a daily newspaper. Today, I work in communications and in higher education for one of the nation's top research universities. In 2020, I became a first-time grandmother to Vincent. As it turned out, I have always had my mother's hands. I just use them to work in different ways, as a daughter, as a mother, and as a writer.
Well, motherhood is not always a tidy endeavor. Every situation, as we're seeing tonight, is complex. So we want to honor the complex work of the Society for the Protection and Care of Children, our beneficiary tonight. So we hope that you'll do what you can, make a further donation, and visit spcc-roch.org to help them with all the complex situations that are happening for mothers here in Rochester. Next, Laura Kline-Taylor examines her own set of complications and an unconventional introduction to motherhood. Here she is with her story, Mother Morphosis.
I can't be the first or only woman to have cracked a beer in response to a positive pregnancy test. However, it was not the response I always imagined I'd have to discovering I was blessed with child. I'd imagined myself becoming a mother all my life with goddess-like glee. I imagined sealing it with a kiss and maybe a photo of us holding a tiny chalkboard over my belly with the baby's due date. But instead, on May 11th, 2015, when that double line revealed itself, I was alone in my bathroom, felt more alone in my marriage than ever, and that fantasy became the first thing I would lose along my journey into motherhood. We'd been trying to get pregnant without much trying to get pregnant, if you know what I mean. We were career-driven, independent, adventurous, and into our 30s. We were not ready. We did not have time, but it was time. Add the shame and the judgment I wrapped myself in from 8 months of trying with no results. And to escape the tyranny of my own worst critic, I fell for a man who was not my husband. Ladies, not the way to do this. Thankfully, I never fell into bed with him, so the question of whose child I'd been blessed with never plagued me. But the positive test result on May 11th was only 10 days after I'd called it off with the other man and confessed to my husband. To call it a mess is an understatement. That story is long, and it's good. In the end, I kept my man, we kept our babe, and today I'm here to tell about the metamorphosis of a woman who stared motherhood in the face for the first time with a positive pregnancy test in one hand and a beer in the other, who faced the possibilities of divorce, abortion, and single motherhood all before the real mothering started, and through that initiation could face her real power and be a woman who would model that for her children and for mothers everywhere. Marking every great metamorphosis is a period of great emergence, where the fruits of hard work can be witnessed. What the transformation of motherhood often forgets to expose first, however, is the process of enclosure, the before story, the preparation and the process of going inward, the version that has nothing to do with nursery room decor or baby shower gifts, family leave logistics, or birthing classes. The process of enclosure for me was psycho-spiritual and emotional. What was I taking with me? And what was I willing to leave behind? Those questions were so confronting to me, I created a way to distract. And did I ever? Over the course of my pregnancy, I developed the arsenal of right responses to the typical questions. Good, I'm feeling good. Oh, about 27 weeks now. No, we don't know the gender. In my mind, the conversation was more like, how the am I going to get to this baby's birthday with some semblance of my life intact? But nobody talks about the mutations of the mind of a woman on the verge of motherhood. I didn't trust people would empathize with my infidelity the way they do with morning sickness or swollen ankles. Yes, my sister had that. It can be tough. It's normal. You'll get through it. We've got you. If I had any real physical ailments, they were overshadowed by the clouds of a scary and sad home life, multiple therapy sessions a week, agony and shame for the mess I'd made, and this lasted through my entire pregnancy and my daughter's first years. When a mother and baby are healthy in pregnancy, people talk about the stuff you acquire in motherhood. It's like you go in and come out with a baby. See, I wasn't prepared for transformation. I got the message that when I got pregnant, what to expect was in a book I could buy or an expert I could hire or another mom's story. So I was expecting, but I wish that book had a chapter called Who Are We Kidding? Expect the unexpected. The intro would start, when you're ready to accept that control is an illusion and there is every possible answer and no answer at all to the questions you're actually going to have with your baby in arms. Congratulations, you'll survive. The sections of the chapter would go on to tell about fear and courage, and that we needed both to survive motherhood. I would learn that motherhood is about discovering who I am when I don't know what to expect, when I didn't choose the circumstances around me, and when I'm brought to my knees. I remember the moment I chose to let go and fully surrender to whatever was going to come next. My husband and I had done a pros and cons list to keeping the baby. He'd threatened divorce. I had no idea how to proceed. And one day I was standing in line at a lunch trunk in New York City with a friend who never seems to get hooked by my drama no matter how hard I try. She always reminds me how magical and powerful I am. And when she said, "What are you going to do?" I heard myself say, I'm just gonna keep going. In that space where there was no room for BS, I chose to stop entertaining yes or no, stay or go, and let myself be in motion in the mess. That's metamorphosis, or maybe mess-amorphosis. With a heavy dose of faith heaped onto my how on earth, I allowed myself to transform. First, to fully dissolve into the mess that was my marriage and my sense of self. And in doing so, I also transformed my story that motherhood would be a losing game. Oh, I did lose some things, but they were things I no longer needed, and so I let them go. I had a ton of ideals about how marriage, pregnancy, and birth should go, and when we learned at a 40-week ultrasound that my daughter was breech, I released the vision of a perfect birth and prepared for a perfect C-section. I believed all men leave, and when mine didn't, I lost the victim story that I'd never have lasting love. I had used success to hide my imperfections, and when I learned that F up and forgiveness could coexist in my story, I lost my constant strive to be perfect, and I got real. My meta-messa-mothermorphosis was rebellious, dramatic, and turbulent, but it led to my emergence as a mother with more courage, voice, compassion, grace, any of that than I may have acquired from simply reading about what to expect. So I discovered that my journey into motherhood wasn't about loss or sacrifice. And I wasn't destined to always be trading quality, time, energy, presence, and joy in one area for overwhelm, depletion, distraction, or absence in another. And I learned that motherhood is an endless game of giving up time, energy, control, and some looking good. But with each layer I shed, I become more. And on May 11th, 2018, exactly 3 years from that very first day, my second child, our son, was born. And with him, I emerged, a woman who owned her power and her ability to destroy what she no longer needed so as to be free to create more. And that's my stand for all of us who dare to call ourselves mothers, that we confront every how the moment with a heavy dose of faith and a who the knows. And we collect the tools to keep going when the stuff of life shows up that we're least expecting, so we can metamorphose again and again through the life cycles of motherhood.
Thank you, Laura. We're going to continue on the theme, this brave and courageous theme of embracing all of life's stops, starts, and phases. Here is Sarah Webb with her experience of starting over on a better path with Begin Again.
No one tells you that becoming a mother means becoming familiar with being in a perpetual state of loss. From the moment a child slips from the mother's body, so too begins the act of physical separation. A series of sighs and farewells to be repeated again and again. First steps, first day of school, first crush, first heartbreak. And yet there is also a tethering in all of these firsts, just as the tide is pulled and teased back to the shore. Mothering embodies an inherent losing and coming back, of finding one's way in the ebb and flow. It is the intuitive knowing that yes, the umbilical cord will be severed, and that your child will tenderly be returned to your arms. We don't raise our children to remain small and rooted. Rather, the greater accomplishment is to be both a part of the nurturing process and to allow them the spaciousness to find, to receive, and follow their own light. It is unwritten but understood that our children are the ones who will do the leaving. But there was a time in my family when I was the one who lost my way, submerged in an ocean of alcohol. It caught me by surprise, for it was never as I intended to show up in my life or that of my children. I had no experience with alcoholism per se, other than blurry, uninformed impressions that I did not equate to myself. I likened what happened with my drinking within the context of The Sun Also Rises, when Mike Campbell is asked, "How did you go bankrupt?" 2 ways: gradually, then suddenly. If I can point to a moment when I slid from being a social drinker into the alcoholic sea, it was after the death of my mother-in-law, another mother who had arrived unexpectedly into my life. A woman I didn't know I could love so fiercely until she was gone. In her passing, not knowing how to mourn or heal, I sought solace and soothing in drinking, my mother's helper. I drank quietly, alone, at night, but how I drank made it no less of a disruption. At bedtime, I would read to my children, sometimes skipping passages, often slurring my words, at first just falling asleep in their beds, until ultimately blacking out entirely. I thought alcohol was taking care of me, but in truth, I was disappearing. I was disappearing in plain sight. Mother's ruin. My husband finally gave me an ultimatum. If you don't stop drinking, I'm going to divorce you and take the kids. How I stopped, the steps I took are for another story. But what I can say was I began a journey, and so too, a gradual return to light. Coming back to where you started is not the same as never leaving. So too sobriety, for I had to relearn everything. I had to begin again. I began with a series of unseen acts of mending, sewing the many badges on my child's scouting sash, running stitches that had come undone under the seam of a collar, the hemming of trousers just slightly too long, a few small repairs. And slowly that light and my life became brighter, although I knew not everything that would be illuminated along the way. Ultimately, sobriety did not save my marriage. It's no one's fault. It happens. I know now that the marriage was going to end whether I had stopped drinking or not, but I am grateful for the dignity and the presence I was able to leave. On the 9th year of my sobriety, my eldest came to me. They had friends coming into town for the weekend, and their studio apartment wasn't large enough to accommodate the group. They had a choice between staying at their father's, who was away for the weekend, or can we stay with you? If you were 23, which would you choose? I know a vacant house would have felt far more entertaining for myself. And in that moment, I realized that when I was drinking, I was the empty house, but that in sobriety, I was chosen to be their mother. Terry Pratchett wrote, "We go away so we can come back, so we can see the places we came from with new eyes and extra colors, and the people there see you differently too." What does it mean to be a mother? Honestly, I have no idea other than to be in relationship, to be in relation with one's children. For many years, I lost sight of that understanding. I lost sight of everything I loved when I allowed my primary relationship to be with alcohol. My children are older now, as do all of us. They have their successes, they have their struggles, and I have the grace to be present for both. Motherhood is nothing but an extraordinary creative collaboration. It's the process of being and becoming yourself in relationship to another. It's as empowering as it is humbling, but it is the practice I am grateful to return to again and again and again.
I'm just blown away by the huge heart and courage of all of our storytellers. Can we have a round of applause for everyone? Throughout the mess of life and motherhood, your mom is your window to the world, no matter how old you are. Moms are often called to protect us from villains, even as they battle their own. With more on that topic is Cheryl Cleary with Monsters in My Head.
Mama. Her voice was just a whisper, followed by a short pause. Mama. Mama, she eagerly pleaded, growing increasingly frustrated and desperate for a response. It was dark. 2 a.m. dark. I lifted my head just high enough to make out a 3-foot-tall shadow standing at the foot of my bed. The small trace of light coming in from the kitchen revealed she had one hand clinging tightly to her blankie and the other gripping a nearly empty sippy cup. I sunk my head back into the pillow, hoping to go unnoticed. Silence. Phew. She must have given up, I thought. Maybe she went back to bed. Well, that was easy. Mama! She yelled, this time demanding she be heard. Damn it! So much for the power of positive thinking, I groaned. What, Hannah, what? I yelled as I bolted upright. My anger was immediately replaced with remorse for my unsympathetic reply. My sleep deprivation combined with being 6 months pregnant had my patience at an all-time low. She had been making a habit out of getting up all hours of the night, bringing my exhaustion to minuscule levels of understanding. Mama, there's monsters. Her pleading was once again back to an insecure whisper. The tremble in her voice revealed to me that these monsters were, indeed, very real to her. There's no monsters, Hannah. Now go back to sleep, I assured her, and hoped she would miraculously morph into an obedient toddler overnight. I slumped my head back into the pillow in a desperate pursuit to get more sleep, knowing full well my attempt would result in nothing more than abandoned efforts. They're in my room, she persisted. Come lay with me. I moaned. I tried, I thought to myself as I slithered to the end of the bed and secured my feet onto the floor. I suppose I can sleep when I'm dead. The sleep lifted from my eyes, and as I struggled to regain focus, I could see her hair was completely disheveled, and her head was hung low in utter defeat. As she stepped into the light, I could see the apparent dread in her face. I walked myself a minute in her shoes. I thought about these fictitious creatures and how terrifying they must be to her, a little person who feels so helpless and unnoticed. When did they become so real to her? Thanks, Monsters, Inc., I muttered to myself. And I thought you guys were supposed to be the good ones. I reluctantly dragged myself out of bed, and with my hands on my shoulders to guide her, I directed her back to her room. I began to explain to her that the monsters she saw weren't actually there. They weren't real. "You must have had a bad dream, sweetheart," I reassured her. "No, Mama," she wasn't convinced. "See," I confirmed as we entered her room, "no monsters." I flipped on the light switch just long enough for her to assess the situation, but as I walked her closer to her bed, I could still feel the hesitation in her steps. I tucked her back in, and I watched as her cautious eyes darted back and forth across the room. That desperate last-minute attempt at seeking out those flesh-eating creatures that had made themselves comfortable in her room proved to be a success. "There!" She confidently pointed to the corner of the room next to her pink dollhouse. "Where?" I questioned. I saw nothing. "Over there, Mama," she affirmed, the fear in her voice turning quickly to content for proving me wrong. "Honey, there's nothing there." I laughed to myself as I scanned the blob on the wall that had so easily deceived her. "It's just a shadow." She stared a little longer at the corner of the room as the wheels of contemplation spun. I could see her little mind turning in disbelief at the idea that there really wasn't actually anything there. Finally at peace with my convincing, I felt the tension lift as she nestled contently back into bed. She pulled the covers up over her chest and clung tightly to an overloved teddy bear. I comforted her by reading her favorite of Santa's snow globe and watched as her eyes fell heavy and a blanket of security had her falling fast asleep. I breathed a sigh of relief and staggered back to bed, grateful the ordeal never escalated into an all-night excursion of Frozen and 3 a.m. popcorn. I never did have the heart to tell my daughter that monsters actually do exist. That, for me, they really are real. They might not be the obvious ones you encounter in a storybook with sharp teeth and slanted eyes. They don't have slimy skin or pointy horns, and you won't find them lurking under your bed or hiding in your closet. But they do, in fact, exist. They hide in that moment of uncertainty that tells me I can't when I know I can. They are that whisper of self-doubt that tells me I'm not strong enough or smart enough and that everyone else can do it better. They exist in that gentle temptation that, throughout high school, convinced me courage was sold in glass bottles and confidence could be found in rolled-up nicotine. They were that voice inside that told me I was nobody unless I was part of the cool crowd or after-school sports teams. They hid in those lies that told me fitting in was just as good as true belonging, and that impressing others was so much more important than staying true to myself. And in my mid-20s, those same voices would nearly kill me, as they eventually convinced me that pain could be healed through glassine bags and dirty syringes. They deceived me into thinking all I ever needed could be found downtown on any street corner, and that every fear I've ever felt and every tear I've ever cried could all be fixed with one hit of deceptive brown powder. They would persuade me to give up hope time and time again, assuring me it was too late for me, that even God himself had given up on me. They debilitated me with fear through relentless moments of unresolved guilt and resurfacing shame. They reiterated my past through anxiety of public restrooms, filled with flashbacks of overused tourniquets and silver mixing caps. They shouted at me through nightmares of trap houses occupied by lost souls selling lies to kids, and through lonely panhandlers with cardboard signs and empty eyes. And on January 7th, 2017, when I gave birth to my little girl, those voices would try to persuade me that even a mother's love could never be enough to break the chains that bound me. They had me so convinced my story would end with a needle in my arm and a paramedic at my side, that I couldn't possibly be strong enough to win the fight or beat the statistics. But those voices were wrong, you see. As it turns out, her love was enough for me, and God had heard me. She was my answer to all those desperate pleas I was certain had gone unheard. She was my undeniable proof of God's endless grace. as it was through her I found forgiveness can come in even the smallest of packages. It was through her I found I could rewrite my script, have my storybook ending. As she was the one that taught me healing doesn't come by running from pain, but by walking through it. That really living is all about the process and less about the destination. It was her that taught me success isn't measured by fancy cars or corporate ladders, but by inner peace and giving back. That mere existence of life could never be enough, as it's through purpose we find the person we were meant to be. It's through purpose that our life makes perfect sense. And in the grips of her tiny hand, I found that just a sliver of hope can outweigh even the tightest constraints of despair. I found reassurance in moments of doubt and courage in moments of weakness. I found that a single mustard seed of faith can be enough to move the tallest mountains, and that fear is most often a liar, and life really does get better. It was her who taught me sobriety can be so much more heartbreakingly beautiful than I could ever have possibly imagined. And in those days of struggle, when I hear her laugh or see her smile, my problems become small. Those voices become a whisper, and all doubt fades away. And for a moment, I wonder if maybe monsters really aren't real.
I'm going to be a puddle by the end of this, okay? Thank you. With another portrait of bravery, we have Tina Paradiso and her message on the importance of moving forward, even when it feels like all the odds are stacked against you. Here she is with Impact and Evolution.
Blink. That's how fast things change, instantly. I have one biological child who dares to call me the mother of all mothers. While an only child within a nuclear family, he has many brothers and sisters he's not grown up with. However, he works side by side with. My other kids, if you will, all look different, come from different neighborhoods, backgrounds, religions, have different, each having their own unique stories. Maybe it was coming from a family of 4 and being a military brat that had taught me about a different definition of family and community. We were often surrounded by people we did not know, but we were never surrounded by strangers. At this point, you might be thinking I'm a foster parent. I do foster, but not children. I'm a for-profit business owner who fosters next steps. At any given time, I am blessed to meet, work with, foster next steps of young people between the ages of 18 and 24 who have become disconnected from many things some of us take for granted. This is not a story about a company, rather a story of evolution and impact. What started as an intern program has evolved into a life learning journey in humanity. The company's first intern came to us with no history, no work history, had dropped out of high school, did not have a bank account. He did not appear to be motivated for change. However, a persistent program navigator thought he might be a good fit for us. Little did she know at the time, we were all perfect for each other. I had the joy of watching him grow and move quickly with next steps. I was proud to watch him get his first bank account, learn a technical trade quickly, take pride in his work. He was never late, walked through the worst weather when his bus pass didn't work. He started tutoring for his high school equivalency, got his permit, and even bought his first car. He loved learning, having consistency, being safe, and one of his favorite things to do was take his mom to dinner on Friday nights. She was most proud of him. In April of 2019, he went to a youth conference to speak to service providers of programs aimed at helping young people like himself. When he was asked what he wanted to do with his life, he said he wanted to have his own business, the same as what he was currently doing. I was beaming with pride as his work mom. Impact. This is the first of many to come where I saw what impact can inspire and do. From that moment and after a few brief conversations, I helped him start his own company. He would use our space, equipment, and supplies to start from the ground up, his own shop. By May of 2019, he had his first corporate customer. It was extraordinary to watch him grow and learn, evolve into a young business owner, using all his life experiences and skills differently in a different direction. And then we blinked. In June of 2019, he was shot and killed. This brought an entire company to its knees. It stopped our small world on its axis. Impact. We were all impacted in a way we could not express in words. As his work mom, I had never felt pain like this. I ached terribly for his mom, for the team he had come close to, a community that was robbed of an incredible soul. Our family now had an incredible, unfillable tear in its fabric. This tragedy has so many unintended consequences I could never have foreseen. People are put in our path for many reasons, some unknown to us, some clear, the most powerful pathways. DeAndre's tragic death is an inspirational story and continues to bring young people forward to continue the work he was doing. The program has taken on a life of its own, has fast-tracked and accelerated into something I had no idea would happen. One young man, his willingness to learn something different and persevere, to evolve, has inspired compassion, empathy, humanity, and helped create a foundation for many others to move to something they never thought possible before. Like Taekwon, who has risen to supervisor and mentor, who helps the company expand. Like Keith, who is homeless, and he's learning to be a serving leader and works with those that are differently abled. Like Juan, he came to us as a refugee and is working on going to college to become a graphic designer. Like Cameron, who's gone on to become an electrician. Once a mere business owner, I've quickly evolved into a conscious leader and learned how quickly evolution can happen. Blink. That's how fast things change, instantly.
See her face coming back. That is awesome. Amazing. For more of the stark realities mothers grapple with, we welcome Bonnie Jaeckel. Hers is a graphic story that will leave everybody clutching their chest. Let's listen to her blood, sweat, mother's milk, and tears.
In my life, I've had 3 nipples. The first 2 I was born with, and the third one I earned the old-fashioned way, through blood, sweat, mother's milk, and tears. So it was helpful to hear the lactation consultant in the maternity ward admit that breastfeeding is one of the most unnatural, natural things to do. Because with my first child, I didn't know much more about what to do than did my newborn daughter. And according to the lactation consultant, she was still struggling with baby's first job, to get her mouth organized. Really, get her mouth organized. I had no idea a baby has to get her mouth organized. Newborns come preloaded with a tiny bit of instinct, but as a team, we were still figuring out how to make this newly discovered and activated food production and delivery system work. Turns out it's a some assembly required deal. Let's
Let's have you watch a video, Nurse Condello said cheerily, and flipping it on, a mother who knew what she was doing and was amply equipped for it appeared on the monitor, breastfeeding an infant. With one eye full of her feeding equipment runneth over, my husband remarked unemotionally, "I think I see the problem." I mean, just her pink target zone was larger than her baby's entire head. It seemed an unbalanced competition, and my cup was barely half full. "Oh no, size has nothing to do with it," our nurse swiftly corrected him. It took a couple weeks to get the hang of what I'd always believed was natural. Oh, and it was painful at first. Another fact that's conveniently glossed over in the romantic, soft focus images of breastfeeding. Of course, it did all get better. And after several weeks, I figured I could carve out a few hours to attend our company holiday party if I prepared by leaving milk so my daughter could be fed while I was away. I felt good that there were 3 mother's milk bottles ready to go and baby would be provided for. Fine, except for one important detail. What I didn't yet fully grasp about the system was that it continuously produces milk at the same rate, even if it isn't consumed. When I returned home 4 hours later, baby was full and fast asleep. I was also full and had learned the hard way that this production system requires tapping at regular intervals, and woke her up for a command feeding. I came to mothering relatively late in life, so I actually thought I knew a few things on arrival. But I soon learned that a third party can often help you see what you're overlooking. Shannon, our beloved first sitter, mentioned one day that our second daughter was such a happy baby and literally never cried, so long as she was fed on time. And that, I'm sorry to admit, was an aha moment for me, because up until hearing it, I had only fed her when prompted by her crying. Children make the parents. I wasn't a mom until I had them. You learn as you go, helped by others, and yet what you learn with one child may be completely irrelevant with the next. So it was a completely different challenge with our son. His front teeth came in at around 3 months. And in latching on one day, he clamped down with newly erupted pincer upper and lower baby teeth, chomping off all but a thread of my nipple. Bright red blood and milk flowed together. The nurse I spoke to when I called the maternity ward said there was no choice but to continue to breastfeed and that it would heal. Every feeding brought the same initial latch-on pain for me, followed by a blood shooter and a milk chaser for baby. After several days of this, my husband, observing the status of my dangling feeding portal, remarked, again sans emotion, "I don't see how that's going to grow back." I reached out again to the hospital maternity ward nurse, who explained that indeed it wasn't going to reattach, but rather it would crust up and fall off, roughly in 2 weeks' time, and that a new one, my third nipple, would grow from within, and that my only option was to nurse through it, blood and all, which I did. I like to make the analogy that raising children is like making pancakes. With the first, you're untested. The griddle isn't hot enough and your technique isn't quite on point. middle ones tend to take care of themselves. And the last one either gets forgotten and left on the griddle too long, or gets rushed because everyone's hungry, and isn't it time to go to kindergarten already? Most of us aren't born knowing how to be a mother, but unbelievably, though you'll need a license if you want to have a dog or go fishing, there is no licensing program or official training for what may be life's most important role. Instead, there's a lot of trial and error, all with the best intentions and hopefully recoverable errors.
I just want to make sure it grew back. I can't help but think of my lactation consultant. Her name literally was Mary Lou Teets. I kid you not. Thank you. I'd forgotten about her. Laughter, tears, and now goosebumps. So maybe motherhood isn't always pretty, but it is powerful. And so LaKeya Hall has a story about how when mom talks, we believe every word. Here she is with My Mother Said.
As we're traveling home one day on Pennsylvania's Turnpike, I look up and see dark clouds, which look to be miles ahead of us. I recall being a child traveling the same road and my mother drawing my attention to the clouds. With a burst of excitement warming my body, I say, "Hey guys," talking to my two children. "Y'all see those dark clouds up there?" They look out the window and reply they do see the clouds. In my mother's voice and with her confidence, I tell them it could be raining hundreds of miles ahead of us. They're listening attentively, just as I did as a child. I continue to explain how expansive the sky is, and although we can see the rain clouds, we didn't have to worry about encountering the rain. We could just keep enjoying the sunshine as we traveled. My children seemed amazed by this information, and I certainly felt accomplished passing along my mother's story. As I continued driving, smiling as big as the sun is bright, we heard what appeared to be a roll of thunder. As the three of us started looking at each other, wondering what the sound really was, my smile faded as 1, 2, 3, we were bombarded with drops of rain. Immediately, we burst out laughing as my kids jokingly questioned me, "Miles away? Did you mean 5 minutes away?" More laughter proceeded. In that vulnerable moment, knowing I had it all wrong, knowing I said to my children what was said to me, never researching or checking it out for myself, knowing a child's belief that when mother speaks, she speaks gospel. We laughed for a while, and then I explained to my children that I told them that because one day, on this same road, Nana told that story to me. I went on to vow to be better and to be conscious of what information I passed along to them. It is my responsibility to pass truths, not fables, to pass facts, not fiction. Mother's words are believable until they aren't believable. And so I write. I write to give words life, and I speak. I speak so that words dance to a beat that breathes life into vessels like me, mothers like me, women like me. And so I write. Standing by her bed, listening to her words, believing every one. There's a story to tell. She says, stand up straight, look me in my eyes. You say, yes, ma'am, no, sir. Never shrug your shoulders. Listen to my words. You are black and beautiful. Your mother is black and beautiful. Your grandmother is black and beautiful. Put God first and grow with beauty in your strength and power in your words. Speak the truth. I speak to you. I speak of my mother. I speak for my grandmother. My mother said, you see, I am a black woman who has seen some sunshine and felt the rain. I am a black woman, stronger than my circumstances, not limited by my situation. When you hear my name, you think of grace. When you see my face, you feel the promise. So your expectations of me do not define my destiny. This is what my mother said, and you know, mother knows best. Her love is nothing less than unconditional. Her life is devoted to nothing less than your success. She has planted her feet, and so unwavering she stands with faith to move every mountain hindering your plans. She is known as mother, confidant, capital investor, but most of all, love. I want to hear my daughter speak of her mother's mother and the heritage in which she is kin. And this becomes a generational call. You see, I want to be great like all the ones before me, all the great ones who have mothered and nurtured us to excellence. Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Coretta Scott King, the abolitionists and activists, the fighters and table turners, Angela Davis, Maya Angelou, Shirley Chisholm, the queens and trendsetters, the leaders and path makers. And at the top of the list will always be Mom.
Thank you, LaKeya, for that powerful reminder that a mother's lessons never fade. It is a gift to have your story end this show. We hope these stories and the beauty, the bravery of these storytellers inspire you. When our lights come up and you go back into the world, we hope you connect with your own stories about motherhood, stories about strength in chaos and the impact of connection. We hope you write them down. And when you are ready to share, we are ready to listen. And we are here tonight because of an incredible foundation, the Society for the Protection and Care of Children here in Rochester. If you're able, they need us. They need us to listen to their stories. They need us to help them with their stories. So donate at spcc-roch.org. To the production team, thank you for making tonight come to fruition. Keep bringing these glorious voices to us. We are better for hearing them. And now, it is my great pleasure to have the cast stand with me. I am so honored to be joined by them. Thank you for coming to 2021 Listen to Your Mother.
Sometime in our lives, we all have pain, we all have sorrow.
Tonight's live stream for Listen to Your Mother Rochester 2021 was provided by RockVox Recording and Production of Bushnell's Basin, a full podcast and video studio designed for podcasting. Audio, video, voiceover, virtual training, and live streaming, whatever you need, Mouth off at Rockvox, rockvox.com.
What was that like for you to be with your daughter and have your grandchild born? Like, what was that like?
Totally amazing. Totally amazing. That's not every mother gets to do that.
Well, what it meant to you, it meant to me. Because it was having you there for at least one was amazing. Amazing that you were able to be there.
Yeah. And then to see his silver hair. Wow.
Oh, yeah.
Unbelievable silver hair on a baby.
Born on Father's Day.
I mean, but to see that silver hair, it was like, oh my God, he's special. And he is special.
Yeah. But that was awesome.
Firstborn grandchild, too.